Hello and welcome to the next saga of this Stromberg Carlson AU57. So at the end of the last video we'd still got all the power supply to wire up and some of the nodes on this power supply going to these preamp tubes as well. So I've wired up all the power supply, got the switch wired up, the fuses, the IEC. All the nodes are wired up now, bar two of them, so which are just for these preamp tubes here. So once we've got those sorted out, then we can move on to this preamp stage. And we've got 4 channels on this amp, and the customer wants all 4 channels. So one channel is going to be left identical to what's on the schematic. One channel we're going to take from the I think it's the AU17. I'll have to check my notes, and we're going to download that schematic and have a look. So we're going to look at that, and then the other 2 channels are going to be more or less the same as the original, but just with some slight alterations, just to give them a little bit of variation. We're not looking for high gain on this amp. The customer doesn't want that. He's into playing blues and he's not into the high gain stuff, so we're not going to be souping this one up. It's just going to be virtually as it is with just a few changes. So the next thing I've got to do to finish off this power supply is we need a ground point for the preamp tubes here. The only ground point on here is there, as you can't see, but that's riveted into the chassis and that won't do. I suppose I could draw the rivet out and put a bolt in there. That's one option, and that would give us a ground point there. But we've still got, and actually we've got another rivet in there, so we could probably drill that out and put a bolt in and have that as a ground point here, because we've got to put these 2 capacitors on there. These 2 22s are going, so one is, and we need a drop-in resistor, and then one is going there, and the other one, well, we'll just use the same one to show you, is going there. And that's about the best we can get with those, because there's not a deal of room in here. So that's about the only place they can go. Now we've got to lose all these bumblebees. All of this preamp stuff has got, these caps have got to go. We need to test these resistors and any of those that have got to go. The ones, obviously the ones glued up there, have got to go. And then we've got to clean off all these sockets. Now if you remember, these sockets were for the plug-in transformers for the different impedance, but we're not going to use those, so we just need to clean those up. And we may just use 1 or 2 of the pins as securing points. We need some bypass capacitors for these stages as well. So still quite a lot to do on this amp, despite the amount of work that's done. And again, this amp, I've virtually rebuilt it. You know, it is in such a state, virtually rebuilt it. And to be fair, if the first guy had done what I've done with these capacitors here, it wouldn't have been half so much work. But you know, like everything else, they just cut corners. And obviously we've done some things to this amp that's improved it, which is nothing to do with what was done before. So for instance, we had a switch on the tone control, that's now on the back. We've got another extra fuse in there. We've got an IEC, so obviously that's took up time doing all of that, but that's made the amp much better. But now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty, because once I can get amongst these preamp stages, then we can push on and try to get this amp finished. Now the other thing we've got to do on this amp, if we turn it around, so the other thing we've got to do on this amp is to plate up these holes, because these are where the jack sockets are going. Very strange how they've drilled these out. Now we've got these that what the last person who'd put the input sockets in when they'd modded it, because this wouldn't have had jack sockets on originally, they just sandwiched the two of these and then just tightened it up. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that on the inside, and I'm going to drill the holes there and bolt that on, and then we're going to have the jack socket in there. That's what we're going to do for all of them. So that's going to be a bit of a tricky job as well, to do that there and there. And I think I've only got 3 of these, because some of them were smaller, they'd done it with these, which again they just clamped them, but of course they won't reach the screw holes, so we've only got 3 of these big ones. So that's got to be done as well. And then of course we need some Switchcraft switching jack sockets. I've got some coming from Modulus. Right, so I've now put bolts through these, so I've got a ground point here, and I put a bolt through there, and I've got a ground point there, and I've also put some lugs on there, so I've got some extra ground points for these bypass capacitors that we've got here. Now I've got these bumblebees in here, which again have got to come out, and Gooden, who leaves me a lot of comments and keeps me on my toes, he said all those bumblebees in there, you could probably cut them out and then sell them to would-be guitar players to put in their prize Les Pauls and things. So what I thought, if I find my cutters, which are there, I thought we'd cut one out and just test one of them. Now all the others had got glue on them, so they were ruined. These few over here I've survived without too much aggravation, but of course they're all leaky because we tested them in the first part that we did of this amplifier when we assessed it. So we're going to try and test these and see. Let's just test one on this first. Just get some leads for it. Now this, if you've seen this on the channel a few times, this Finersi tester, I upgraded the firmware on it last night. The firmware was 1.5 on there, and the latest firmware was 1.8. So it's supposed to find out a few bugs, including, from what I can gather, the speed up time. I'm sure it said something about the speed up time when testing, so we're going to see as well if that's the case. So let's just put this on capacitance, and we'll have a look. Stick that in there. Oh, that's got to come out anyway. So let's measure this bumblebee, which is a 47 nanofarad. Let's have a look. And it measures 58.2 nanofarad on there. And that's usually pretty accurate, that meter. Right, let's see how the Finersi, or Finsri as I always call it, let's see if it works. .58 nanofarad, exactly same as the other one. So yeah, still took a while to test it though. So let's try another one that we've randomly cut out. There we go, just tilt the amp back. 63 nanofarad, so they're not sparkling, are they? So anybody's wondering how I've been getting these terminals off, these resistors off these terminals, because they're obviously all wound on. Well, what I do is I suck off as much of the solder as I can, and I'm trying not to knock the camera, and then you can see where these wrap round here, and what I do is try and expose those and cut them all, rather than tug on them and try and get them out. And there, so the camera's in really close, I'm struggling to get in, and just go out a bit. And it requires a lot of patience to do this. Like that. So I've cut those off the side now, like that. And I'm only going to show you this once, because I normally have the fan on to suck the fumes out, so obviously if I do that you won't be able to hear me. So now if we go in here with the pliers, and the soldering iron, and we just keep working away, we need to find out which ones are which. So if we go to these two, now on here, see how we go, and you can see when I'm moving that one there, you can see the flux on that one at the side there where the pliers are. Can you see that? So that's what I'm going to aim to cut off now, and that's what I do. I just keep finding these. It's time consuming, but it's better than busting the, because of course you could be doing this on a valve pin. These obviously, you know, are a little bit stronger, but the valve pins won't stand it. So we try to get in there and cut that there on the edge without cutting into the pin, the terminal. So now if we go in again, and then we'll see, we'll heat that up again. And you can see now that that's now free. There, look, you can see that moving. Let's bring the camera a bit more over, so you can see that. You see that moving. So now that's got like a curl on the end. So I'm going to cut that off. Sorry. There, if I can get in. I'm really struggling. So can't come over the top with the camera being there, and out that comes like that. And that's rather than just tugging at them, you know, trying to get them to unravel, and you just have to work your way through it. Then you can see you've got the rest of that pin there, and that'll just fall out. We can get in and get that there, and that just saves those getting broken. So now we've got that one out. So if we look at the top of that pin now, that terminal, you can see we've got another wrap over there. So we try to cut that one off, and I might just have to move the camera back a shade to get that one. I'll go in this way. So again, we go in and try and cut that off like that. Swap hands. So now you can already see that that's now, look, already off there, because we sucked most of the solder off, and that's made that pretty, that's all that was holding it. So if we go in and just, whoops, just gently, I usually get them off quicker than this because I'm not having to go over the camera, but, and then if we just, that just comes out like that, and both of those have just come out, and now that pin is we've got a wire going through there, but we can leave that. So all we have to do now is just clean up the pin, just clean this just like so. We've got, you can see there's more wires there, so we'll get those out now because they're loose. There, that's pulling on the thing, and again there's a little hook on there, so rather than try and pull that hook through, we just snip it off, and there we go. Got the inputs in there, and you can see what I've done there is I've drilled through the 38mm M10 washers that were used as packers just to put these on, and remember they were all loose and they were rubbish. These are proper Switchcraft sockets, switching jack sockets, 3 bolts in because they were already drilled for the previous sockets that they had on here, so we've got 3 bolts in there. So I've just put some M3s in there, star washers, done them up, they're solid, absolutely, and that's what I want to make sure in this amp, that everything is solid. This amp will be winging its way back to Scotland, and it's a long way to send it, so we don't want it coming back, so everything needs to be spot on. Now we've now just got to a point with this where we're ready to wire up these channels. You can see that I've removed these socket things that were in there, and those were for those transformer plug-in impedance transformer thingy-mabobs. We took one of those out, although that one was hardwired. Now, why have I took the sockets out? 2 reasons. One is because just look at them, they're just shocking and they look a mess, and I've tried to clean one up, and I finished up, took some of the pins out and everything, and the sockets are dropping to bits, they're just breaking because they're just old, and I thought I don't particularly want those in here. And the second reason is that I chatted with the customer. This is a schematic for a Masco MA17, and we are going to borrow one of these channels to go into this Stromberg. We have got octal tubes in here, so we've got a 6SC7 here. We're going to use a Russian 6SL7, you can see there, and in place of the 6SJ7 we're going to use this Russian 6J8. So we're going to use those 2 tubes, and we're going to utilize those holes. Now, somewhere I had a couple of tube sockets, so I've got a couple of Belton sockets there. Now, this first stage is grid biased. You can see the cathode's tied to ground. Let's find something to point with, which will be considerably smaller than my finger. So you can see the cathode there is wired to ground. 5.6 meg grid leak resistor, and I'm going to have to make that up in values because we haven't got a 5.6 meg resistor, and not the easiest thing to find now. Find most other values. I can make that up to 5.5, which should be good enough. And then that's going into here. We need a 0.01 capacitor there, 10 nanofarad, 500k pot. We've already got that on here, I think. And then we've got a 270k grid stopper there. Now, if you look coming in here, we've got down here at the bottom, we've got another input here and another 270k, so they're like mixer resistors, and then this channel's coming in there as well, so they're like mixer resistors. Is that the same, that channel? Never really took much notice of the second one. Yes, yeah, that looks about the same. So we can just use that as a grid stopper, or maybe even reduce it slightly. We don't really need 270k on there if it's just a grid stopper. Maybe 100k would do. But basically we're going to copy this channel up to here, and then obviously it'll go off and be mixed into the Stromberg circuit. So now if you look, you can see the holes there. You can also see, we go in a bit, that someone at some time in here has been drilling holes, and their metalwork is even worse than mine. So you can see there and there and there and there. So this is what makes me think this amp at some point has been a kit. I don't know. Still keep coming to that conclusion that these may have been sold in kits. I may be wrong. Certainly you people in the States will know a lot more about these than me. So looking at these channels, and I've had a bit of a leg at this schematic overnight. So if you remember, we've got this 40 volt feed to the coming into these cathodes. Where are we? Not on that one, on this one. Well, we have got them on that one as well, but we'll look on this one because they're a bit clearer. If you look, we've got this 40 volt feed coming in there. There's the plate resistor, but then it goes off to the cathodes there, and then down this wire and into this remote control. And suddenly it dawned on me that that's part of the remote control circuit. We don't need that, so we're going to remove all of that. We're going to remove those 270Ks that are going there, and they've got one there, one there. So I've got those two sockets fitted, you can see there, and those holes didn't line up correctly, so I've just had to turn them slightly and put the holes diagonally from those. There wasn't enough room for them to go that way, so I've just turned them because it meant having to bodge the holes and widen them, and I'm not doing that. So they're nice and neat now. And I've got rid of the other socket there that looked a mess, and I'm going to order some 30mm blanking grommets for these two holes. I'm just blank them off so that it just looks tidy. So now we've got to start wiring these channels up, but first of all we're going to remove all of these carbon comp resistors. None of these are any good really. I think we've managed, in fact I've got that capacitor to change there. That needs to be changed because it's out of tolerance, badly out of tolerance. I've left a couple in here that are okay, and really when you kind of look at it, you're thinking we might as well have changed them all. Right, there we go, all cleaned out, and I decided I'm just going to swap these tube sockets because it took a couple of minutes to drill them out. Didn't take long at all, 5 minutes at the most. I got to be picking it off those pins, and if I'd have broke any of the pins I'd have had to swap them anyway. Now we've got some new sockets going in. It just saved a lot of time. It's only a 5 or 10 minute job just to get those in there. It took absolutely ages to get those off there, cutting and messing around. And I actually broke one of the terminals. Not that it matters because we've got some spare ones, but I've still broke that. The first one I've broken in this amp. I've done all of that, and I've got a bit impatient with that one and broke it. But it's no problem because, as I say, there's one at the side of it that's never been used. So it's just a matter of cleaning that up, and my soldering iron tip, which is looking a bit gungy after that, so he's going to be cleaned. So that's all the rubbish out of here now. And there's just a few bits stuck on here, but they're no problem. I've disconnected a couple that I connected up, but that's no big deal either. There we go, that's more like it. I do not like a scruffy soldering iron tip. So there we go. So I'm just going to clean all these pins up now, get the flux off the bottom of on the fibre there, clean that off, clean the pins up, get these sockets in, and then we can start wiring it up. Right, we've finally got this all wired up. Now the next thing is we're going to fire this up, but we're not going to do that in this episode. We're going to do it in the next one. So I'm just going to go through some of the stuff that I've done to get this amp up to where we are now. So we took a channel from the Masco MA17. The customer's got one of those Mascos. So if we look here, we've got the 6S C7. We've put a 6S L7 in there. We've got, you can see this set out here, it's grid biased this, and then we've got a 6SJ7, we've got a Russian 6J8 in there. So we've wired that up as per this schematic there, and then we've mixed that in with the other channels. So this channel here at the top, which was the originally the auxiliary input channel, we've used these stages here, but obviously as we pointed out, we've got all this going on here with the original sockets and so forth that were there. So we've got a 1 meg resistor there, grid leak, so we've put a grid stopper in there, and our grid stopper is 68k, I think we put in there. I've got that slightly covered over with the each ring. 68k into there, and then we've the rest of this is identical that you can see on there. 12k resistor on there on that first stage there for the cathode with a 10 microfarad bypass cap, and then we've got a 1.5k there, no bypass cap. So the next channel, or the two channels that we've copied from here, but we've just made a slight difference between the two. Again, we've had to add a grid stopper on this channel here, so we've got a 47k there on one of the channels. We're going in, we've got all the same set out here. Plate resistor 47k going in there, you can see, so 100k plate resistor there, so we've got that going on, and we've copied basically all of this. Now the other channel that's left, we've used this again, this same setup, but we've altered some of the components slightly, so they're not exactly the same. Then they're only slight differences, there's nothing. So we've got a 22 nanofarad bypass cap there instead of a 47, just a slight difference. And we've got a slight difference on the bypass capacitor, so instead of having 10 microfarad on there, we have 100 microfarad. So we've just made those a bit different, but the gain wise they're still the same, everything's still the same on them, just about. Oh, we made a slight difference with the plate resistors, but only slight on there. Well, we've got 68k on there for plate resistors, so we've just upped the gain very slightly on that one, but minimal really. So that's basically where we are with this amp. And you can see we've got the caps here for the last two nodes, the electrolytics there in the last two nodes. You can see we've got a lot more space in here now than we had before. And you can see I've obviously wired these filaments because these are all new tube sockets, and I've just put them up and out of the way rather than mingling them all in there. We've mixed into that tube there from all the channels. The treble control we put in, all the power supply stuff here we've done. I think you've seen that already. We've done all of this stuff here. The rest of it you've seen in previous clips of the video. So expecting a few problems when I fire this amp up, but it's, you know, such a big project. We never really got to test this amp properly when we fired it up for the first time. We'd got, obviously this pot had been damaged, this amp had quite a blow, so on the front, so another one of these pot knobs is chipped as well, so I'm guessing that this took quite a whack on the front. So we may find that one or two of these pots aren't quite right, they may not, we don't know. So tune into the next episode to see this amp fired up for the first time, and we'll see where we go from there, what problems we have, if we have any. We'll work through those problems until we can get it on the 4x12 and give it a blast. So that'll do it for this one. So thanks for watching. You all take care, and I'll see you all in another video. Bye bye for now.